Having examined Kant's approach to ethics, that deontological approach of duty, let's extend it to look at one that's quite topical globally at the moment, human rights. So I think human rights is an extension of Kant's idea that there are these absolute moral principles that should be applied, and they're the kinds of things that people appeal to whenever they're making demands of business and governments, etc. They're appealing to people's human rights. And how are these related? Well, when someone has a right or an entitlement to something, then it really means someone else has a duty to actually provide that entitlement. So Kant's talking about you and what your duties are, whereas rights are the entitlement that arise from that duty. And particularly where those rights become embedded in law, they become legal rights. So we're going to talk about moral rights here, some of which are legal, but we're particularly focused on the idea of moral rights or human rights as you might more readily recognise them. So what's distinguishing about these moral rights or human rights? Well, whether or not they're legal, many people believe that these are the rights that we all have, no matter what the law says. So again, we see this divergence about a legal standard from an ethical standard. And the basis is that these rights aren't granted by the state or by any government. They're just inherent rights that you have because you are a human, and that they apply irregardless of your demographics or your social condition or anything like that they apply to everyone all the time. So the qualities are that they're universal, that they apply to everyone all the time, that they're equal, that everyone has the same rights, that they're inalienable. What does inalienable? It means you can't sell it or get rid of it. It means you will always have it. So you can't sell yourself into slavery, even if you agree to it. It's an inalienable. Your freedom is an inalienable. You can't sell it. You'll always have it. And that they're natural. By natural, we mean they're not dependent upon the state or any other institution for that matter. So following World War II, you could see various governments from around the world come together in the United Nations, and they try to come up with a set of universal declaration of human rights, given some of the horrors that had occurred in the Second World War. So they made this declaration of these human rights, which remember are independent of the nation state. So Article 23, for instance, considers that everyone has the right to work, to choose where they're employed, to just and favourable conditions of work. Everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay. Everyone has the right to just and favourable remuneration. Everyone has the right to form and to join trade unions. So I've chosen some particularly business-focused human rights, but essentially we have this body saying that everyone has these rights no matter what the laws are in any country, and that they have these rights, they can't sell them, they can't trade them away, and that they're natural rights. So these rights don't really tell us what we should do. They don't actually form a framework to making a decision. But what they do is they provide constraints on what we can take. So no matter what the consequences, the idea is that we should respect these human rights, that we shouldn't transgress these human rights. There's not a real lot of content there, and that's because essentially human rights as we understand them at the moment, or as the way they're enacted at the moment, is that we've had this body of people drawn from these governments come together and decide on a list of rights that people actually have. That's essentially where they come from. And it's not the same as a Kantian approach where you've got to work out for yourself. We are provided this list of human rights. So that raises a number of potential critiques with the human rights approach. For instance, people don't agree with every right. You could even take one of the most fundamental rights, the right to life. Right? Now, I think most people, almost universally, would agree people have a right to life, but then people start having exceptions to that. Some people believe in capital punishment. When does life begin, etc. So even if you can get a broad agreement with the motherhood statement, the implementation becomes wildly problematic. So this idea that we all agree that there are these human rights doesn't work that well in practice, and it's not actually accurate. The second key problem that you've got is the one that Kant was trying to solve, right? The declaration could be something that these are self-evident, but are they? What test are you coming up with? How are you developing the idea behind these rights? Like, how are you working out that this is a right or this is not a right? In essence, what we've got is some received wisdom from an authority. That's where the human rights list that most people appeal to come from. Just like back in medieval times, people had a higher source of authority, or some people still do, right, through religion. So it really leads to the problem of subjectivity. You can say that something is self-evident, but what is self-evident today might not have been self-evident 10, 20, 200 years ago. So does that mean the rights change over time? So how are they universal, etc.? You run into all these kinds of problems because there's no real way we can work out what a right is. The rights that we have at the moment are more the result of a political process than any reasoned model. And finally, one of the key problems with rights, which is the same problem that Kant had, is that we don't know what to do when rights conflict. What happens when your right for non-discrimination clashes with my right of freedom of association, for instance? There are all these problems where people would draw the line differently between rights or a hierarchy of rights. And even the idea of a hierarchy of rights breaches the idea of having rights. Yeah. So the simplistic application of human rights often leads to a number of practical problems. And that's something we will return to when we start thinking about SDGs and whether businesses should apply them.